We came up with some of the things that we suspect you want to know about. And we're both so committed to the practical. We're not theorists. Here's the down in the trenches. So let's start with, I have to nag my son to do anything. Let's just jump right into a favorite one.
And I am going to say, I just have to touch one other thing on here. We do know that boys' hippocampus tends to be really effective around a single thing. If they're building something or they're into a game, they'll remember everything about that, but they won't remember things around the edges. And I had one of my 8-year-old sons come to me one morning and say, "Mum, where are the socks?" And I looked, goodness me, I did roll my eyes. Sweetheart, they are where I have always the socks. I would try there. I do think I've got a few blogs written about what was he thinking. No, he wasn't thinking. So let's go back to nagging. So let's just say it's his turn to do the dishwasher, or he's not picking his towel up. Okay, so the number one thing is that when we nag, and you really do think, how can I get him to remember? Those of you who've got boys 12 to 15, the brain pruning that happens prunes some of their memory and organization skills, so they get worse. Oh, I'm so sorry. They don't want to get worse. And I have worked with boys who seriously, the mother sent me for counseling. He's left his backpack on the bus with a Mac Air in it and a phone. He's lost his football boots. He's forgotten his orthodontist, even though I texted him. What's going on? And I have to explain to them that he is feeling incredibly vulnerable right now because a part of his brain no longer functions the same. And it's brilliant. We're getting messages from parents who are reading this to their 13, 14-year-old sons who have lost so many things. And there's this palpable relief on their face going, oh, because we think they're deliberately not paying attention. So put ourselves in the same situation, right? Okay, so they've forgotten some things. I am going to say again that nagging, which is what they've heard from the time they were little, because haven't they been forgetting things like cleaning their teeth and anything? So what happens is the brain's good at zoning out now. Yeah, it just goes, there's that voice, I don't have to listen. And it's not for me. And if they are doing something at the time on their phone, maybe watching TV or maybe eating or maybe building Duplo Lego, they can't hear you because of the single focus. So annoying. So my challenge to those is, once again, if you connect before you direct, so you go over and you rub their back and go, dishwasher. Thanks, babe. Yeah, keep rubbing for a moment to make sure he's heard you. Or you go over and rub their back and say, it's time for dinner, rather than call from the kitchen, because they won't hear you from the kitchen.
Yeah.
Immediately you put that in place, and with a slightly beautiful, tender word of endearment.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure you did that.
Yeah, absolutely, no question, because by the time you get to a little way into early adolescence, you will honestly think an alien has stolen your beautiful boy and you've lost him forever. He is equally as confused. He is feeling vulnerable, because guess what happens when he forgets things? They get, oh my goodness, the things that they tell me in class, some of them turn up in the wrong classroom going, oh, miss, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Oh, no, I'm not supposed to be here. Do you know where I'm supposed to be? And you would say, have you got your timetable?
Like your schedule?
Yeah, schedule. I got, no. So can you see again? And this can last months. But if all we are doing is nagging and growling at them, you are eroding self-worth. You are like putting fuel on the inner fire of I'm useless, I'm dumb, I'm awful.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to like me, and I've let my mum down again. Like the endless disappointment that we often feel in this window, we've got to be so careful of that, because I have had a number of boys I've worked with who've seriously contemplated ending their lives because of the endless disappointment look on their mum and dad's face. So again, there's too much pressure on them sometimes in a window when developmentally they are incredibly vulnerable. So the window is pretty similar to the 3 and 4 window, where they get big feelings, which is what happens same time. They're very egocentric. It's about them.
Yeah.
They also do really make poor choices around touching their penis when they shouldn't be, but it feels good. And I need to touch on that again, not literally touch it, but just say that can be a source of comfort for a lot of little boys, because it's their friend. So getting growled at for touching a friend. So that's our conversation again. That is a private part. And if you want to touch that, then your bedroom is the private place for that. And we need to talk about that, because boys often in that 13 and 14 window think it's quite funny to grope another boy's genitals, because he's their mate and this will be fun. Whereas if we haven't coached them about inappropriate boundaries around things and the consent and the okay from early on,
Right.
they're now experiencing some serious challenges in our schools and colleges because they think it's funny.
Yeah.
Where in actual fact, it's not funny. And then when they do the same sort of stuff to girls, equally thinking it's funny, there's that line in the sand. And I write about both books about the line in the sand that you have to coach your boy with. Not yelling, shouting, and lecturing, is in these quiet moments. And so I touched on the rubbing. Where do you have good conversations with your boys about deep stuff? So I said at the beginning before we start, I have 2 roosters, and I only ever had to have serious conversations with them. My lambs they didn't even know I had boundaries.
Wait, tell people what that means, because those are your own
roosters
terms.
are your alpha males, heightened sense of their own importance, want to win everything, don't want to share nothing, opinionated. It's the classic white male alpha that the world has portrayed the best form of male. At the other end are lambs, and this goes girls and boys, same. They're more tender and sensitive. They're not into playing elite sport. They don't necessarily have to win. They don't chest bang. And what we've done is we've made it only acceptable to have one form of boy. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'm now celebrating, is that it doesn't matter as long as we're a respectful, caring human being. Who cares if we want to chest bang? But those rooster boys of mine, I had to practice firm, tough love at times. That doesn't mean to say I hit them, shouted them, ashamed at them, but I had to make them have experience a really uncomfortable consequence as a consequence of their actions. So one of the oldest one was 16. And of course there's this, so his younger brother, 2 down, so he was 12, equally thinking he's a rooster. So the older brother used to often do affectionate punching, but it was getting deliberately harder. And I could see what was going on. So I've cautioned him a couple of times. And then I've said, if you're unable to do that and make that change with your choices, I'm taking your surfboard off you for 2 weeks. That was his favorite thing in the world. And he did. He hit him again, and I removed it. And it was the longest 2 weeks of my life with that boy. And I didn't buy into any arguing. It was just, that was it, not negotiable.
Yeah.
And you know what? That even immediately after I'd implied that serious punishment, I went down and said, it's time for dinner, babe. I've got dessert tonight. I went back to treating him exactly the same as before the punishment. I might make him a hot chocolate just the same as I did before. I would go and pick his friends up. I would do everything exactly the same. The only thing that had changed was he wasn't having his surfboard. And the second part to that is that where do you have a conversation with a boy who is definitely doing these things away from anyone else? It goes the same for teachers as it does for parents. One-on-one. Mine was on the deck. I had a deck, and I would say, I need to have a chat on the deck. And they go, oh, no, it's a deck chat. Oh, no. They'd already start thinking about what might be about. And I'd go out and I'd try to stand on the deck, and I wouldn't directly look at them. And this is a huge thing again. I've already said it before. No eyeball to eyeball standing in front, having sand beside you, to the side of you, which is why car conversations around sex, pornography, being revolting are so powerful.
Let's stop there and say it again. Conversations about sex, pornography, the really intense things, they're parallel. You're
side by side.
You're not looking at each other. Yeah.
No,
too much.
Triggers immediately threat. And then we'd have that conversation. And again, the conversation, I've got a whole heap of lists around how do we have those and how do we start those conversations? And very much, and I know you believe in this as well, Susan, it's the feedback sandwich. You always start with something loving about your son, that you know how much I absolutely love you and admire you, and I'm absolutely blown away with how well you're doing in life. However, this is no longer acceptable, and these are the reasons why it's not acceptable, and I'm wanting to raise you to be a good man that's respectful of others. So this is how that will need to be, and if that doesn't happen, then this is the consequence. And then at the very end, I'll say the same thing. I love you more than every single star in the night sky, and they'll go, whatever. And then the conversation is done. I do not talk about it with anybody else. I do not go and talk to it, even my sister. I don't talk, because that is really huge.
Great.
In boy world, is their privacy. And it's one of the most common mistakes I hear parents make, is that they go share, even sometimes you need their permission to share good news. I know
Yeah.
it sounds ridiculous,
You
but
know,
they,
to this day, Maggie, if I'm
Yep.
going to reference my son in a blog, I ask him. If
Yep,
it's going to be a photo,
exactly.
I ask his permission.
Totally. I have to get permission on what photos I'm allowed to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
It's so funny because, of course, they blow it up and check how good they look. They don't care about how good their brother looks, which I think is just divine. Okay, so we've got that one. And I think it's really important that sometimes it can be even, they're not good at maintaining long verbal conversations because of what you talked
Right.
about before. It can be too long. And so they get so far and then they get this glazed look, and they're not deliberately glazing out, but it's just too much for them to comprehend. And
process.
they're a pragmatic kind of gender, which means I'm trying to look at the problem I have to solve. But if you give me too many problems in a conversation, I'm trying to solve the first one. I've not heard the rest. So
Exactly.
I talk about a mum letter. And the mum letter is very similar to what I've already just talked about verbally. But what I found was those boys, when it comes from that loving space, often have to read something 2 or 3 or 4 times to really process the message that I'm trying to give them with love and respect. And it's so funny because those 2 rooster boys of mine that nearly murdered each other as teenagers, and I used to, on weekends, hope I could send one away for the weekend just to give us a break. I love them, but they were just always at each other, always competing. Anyway, they ended up living together in Sydney in an apartment, which I thought was so funny given their background. I sent a letter down one day with some tickets, and they pulled it out of the letterbox, and they both looked at each other and went, "Oh no, it's a love letter. Oh, what have you done something? I don't know." And they laughed because they didn't know either of them had ever had one. Now, they didn't open it for days until they checked with me what it was. And I said, "No, it's tickets, you silly googs." But I love the fact that it was just between me and them, right? Again, that respecting of that.
Wow.
And that one of them even said to me, because he said that he gets that and he goes and sits in the toilet and reads it over and over again. He said, one of the ones, he said, "Mum, the letter was so long, I got a numb bottom sitting, reading it." And then, of course, I don't have to check in on him. And that's the other thing. We want to check in, don't we? We want to check in. Has he got it? We've got to have some faith that we've done our best, and he may need to make another mistake to get it. But ultimately, they need that. And the dads do it a little differently. Yep, dads do it differently, and that's equally as important. However, us females, with all our words, and we get worried more and we stay awake all night worried about something. But we've got to choose the battles, Susan, that some things, like the messy bedroom versus inappropriate usage of digital devices, shut the door. I just can see that sometimes when you're on at them all the time about little things,
yes,
you miss the space for the big ones.
That's exactly right. And that harks back to the thing about nagging that people were saying, what do you do? Do you want to touch any further on that? Talk about, I love the back rub.
Absolutely.
How do we get them to look up and disengage?
One of the most clear things we know is that we know they're a bit more forgetful and less disorganized. What we do know is that they're only focused on single focus stuff. So making sure, one of the most common nagging things is around chores. So you've got to have basically a visual very clearly for your boys until they're 25 if they're still home. And so that it's very clear. And all you have to do is you hold their hand and pull them over and look at Tuesday. It's a bit like some good men who love to do the bin, forget it's bin day. They're not bad, but they're consumed by something else. And we need to be respectful of that. But that milk carton that got left on the bench all night in the middle of summer, in the morning, when they finally stagger out, wait till they've possibly had something to eat. Then I'd probably say, this milk was left on the bench all night. It's probably a bit off. Know anything about that one? Because then they go, "Oh, yeah, that might have been me." No intention again to do that. And the same as, how frustrated do we feel when we open the refrigerator and find the empty milk?
Yeah. Part of this is the humor of, oh, this is who he is. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't have responsibilities or that they don't need to be accountable. And it might mean that they need to run down to the market and get more milk for the rest of the family. But what you're doing, and I want to point out to everyone, is there's no shame here. There's no, do you have a brain or not? You
Yeah.
can seem to remember every phone number of every friend or every statistic about your favorite basketball team. Why can't you remember to put the milk away? And we're just inviting you to think differently about it.